There's a very specific fantasy that I think everyone who's ever tried to uh, write a book or paint a painting or even just write a really good email subscribes to. It's the fantasy of the lightning bolt.
The eureka moment, the divine spark.
Exactly. The idea that you are sitting there, in a lonely room, staring at a blank page, the cursor is just blinking at you, and then suddenly, out of the ether, you pull something into existence that is 100% unique, something that has never been seen, never been felt, or described in the entire history of the universe. It's almost a spiritual idea, really. The artist as a little god, creating worlds from absolutely nothing.
It is. It's the foundational myth of Western creativity, for sure. We call it the soul creator theory. It's the reason we put authors' names in, big gold letters on the covers of books.
Right.
We worship the individual mind as this fountain of invention. We want to believe that inside every single writer is a unique universe just waiting to explode outward.
Right. It's romantic. It's incredibly seductive. But what if all of that is a lie? What if I told you that, according to the text we're diving into today, true creativity, in the sense of actually making something genuinely new, has been dead since the Roman Empire?
It is a confronting thought, to say the least, and it's the absolute central thesis of the controversial essay we're covering today. A Question of Plagiarism by a writer named Dixon Kinqade.
And let me tell you, Dixon Kinqade is not exactly polite about it. He doesn't tiptoe around the subject or, try to let you down easy. He introduces himself in the very first paragraph as a plagiarist extraordinaire.
He wears the title like a badge of honor. He's almost daring you to judge him right from the first sentence.
Absolutely.
But before you, the listener, hit the pause button thinking we're about to give a tutorial on how to, cheat on your university dissertation or steal a coworker's presentation, we need to clarify the mission here.
Yes.
This deep dive isn't about academic dishonesty. We're not talking about copying a Wikipedia page and handing it in to your professor.
No, this is so much bigger than that. Kinqade is launching a philosophical attack on the very architecture of storytelling itself. He's arguing that what we call writing in the modern era is actually just, remixing. He's suggesting that the modern author is less of an inventor and much more of a compiler of pre-existing parts.
It's a challenge to the ego, essentially. That's what it boils down to. He believes that we, as a species, have exhausted our capacity for novelty. And today, we're going to unpack his argument layer by layer.
Right.
We're going to look at the historical limits of storytelling, his really audacious claim about the Romans. We're going to get into this so-called illusion of personal experience, which is, frankly, a bit of an existential crisis waiting to happen for some people.
We'll also get into what he calls the prison of language, where he argues that the English language itself prevents us from being original. And finally, and maybe most importantly for him, we have to talk about the money. Because for Kinqade, the line between stealing and art is drawn with a dollar sign.
It's a cynical view, certainly, but by the end of this, you might find it's also, in a strange way, the most liberating way to look at creativity. If you stop trying to be a god, maybe you can just focus on being a good craftsman.
So buckle up. If you consider yourself a creative person, prepare to have your ego bruised just a little bit. Because if Dixon Kinqade is right, none of us are as special as we think we are. Let's jump into segment 1, the philosophy of the remix.
So Kinqade starts with the heavy artillery. He knows he's about to make a very controversial point, so he immediately hides behind two of the biggest names in the history of art.
He does.
He drops two of the most famous quotes about art right at the top of his essay to frame his entire worldview.
He quotes Pablo Picasso, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." And then, of course, the literary version from T.S. Eliot. "Good writers borrow, great writers steal."
These are the classic shields, right? Every writer who has ever been caught lifting an idea has hidden behind T.S. Eliot. It's almost a cliche at this point.
It really is.
But what I appreciate about Kincade's approach is that he immediately admits these quotes are usually stripped of all their nuance. He's upfront about it. When T.S. Eliot said that, he wasn't telling you to go plagiarize Moby Dick word for word.
Right.
He was talking about absorbing an entire tradition and then transforming it, making it your own, building upon it.
Exactly. Usually when people use those quotes, they're just trying to justify laziness.
Yeah.
But Kinqade uses them to pivot to a comparison that I have to say is pretty undeniable. He points a finger directly at Hollywood, and this is where the argument really starts to get some traction for me.
It's the most accessible entry point to his argument. He asks a very simple question. If Hollywood can constantly remake, reboot, or reimagine a film, why is it considered taboo for authors to do the exact same thing with stories?
It's a really fair point. I mean, think about it. How many times have we paid money to see Batman's parents die in an alleyway?
Oh, countless.
We've seen it in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2020s. We go to the theater, we buy the popcorn, and we watch the exact same origin story.
Right.
Maybe with a grittier color filter or a different jawline on the actor, and we call it entertainment. We don't walk out demanding a refund because we've seen this before.
We even debate which version is better. We engage with the execution of the remake. We say things like, oh, I liked the lighting in this one, or I preferred the pacing in that one. We compare Christian Bale to Robert Pattinson.
Exactly.
But, as Kinqade points out, if a novelist took, say, The Great Gatsby, changed the names to Jay and Daisy, kept the plot absolutely identical, and then released it as a new book.
Oh, the literary world would scream plagiarism. They would be burned at the stake. Metaphorically, of course.
But the outrage would be immense. So the question is, why the double standard? Why is visual media allowed to constantly remix and retell, but written text is expected to be some kind of virgin territory every single time?
It seems so arbitrary when you lay it out like that.
Kinqade suggests it's because we still hold on to this 19th century romantic ideal of the genius author when it comes to books. Movies are collaborative. We know hundreds of people work on them, so we see it as an industry.
Right, it's a product.
It's a product. But books, we want to believe that the novelist is tapping into some kind of mystical singular source. But he argues that writing is technical. It's a trade.
Like a carpenter.
Precisely. He believes writing should be treated more like building a car. You don't invent the wheel every time you design a new Ford. You use the wheel that works, you use the chassis that works, you innovate on the margins.
That brings us to the core implication of this. If writing is just assembly, then the new ideas aren't actually new at all. And this leads to his biggest, boldest claim. The one that made me physically, stop reading for a sec to process it.
The big one.
He says, and I'm paraphrasing, but barely, that every single creative work of fiction produced since the Pax Romana, the Roman Empire, is technically plagiarism.
Yes. The direct quote is, "Following the Greco-Roman plays, not a single original work of fiction has been created."
That is just wild. I mean, that sweeps thousands of years of literature into the trash bin of unoriginality.
Yeah.
Shakespeare, plagiarist. Dickens, plagiarist. J.K. Rowling, total plagiarist. Stephen King, plagiarist.
In his specific structural view, yes. Now, to be fair to the text, he does walk it back slightly. He adds a little parenthetical. Okay, perhaps I exaggerate, but only a little.
Only a little.
But we need to take the core of that assertion seriously. When he references the Pax Romana, he's not just talking about a time period. He's talking about the structural solidification of drama, of what a story even is.
He's talking about the invention of the archetypes, right? The moment we as a culture decided what a story actually looks like, the fundamental building blocks.
Precisely. The Greeks and the Romans, they mapped out the human condition with frightening, almost mathematical accuracy. They defined tragedy. They defined comedy. They defined the hubris of the hero. They defined the inevitable fall. They gave us the trickster, the mentor, the star-crossed lovers.
All the tropes we still use today.
All of them. Kincade's argument is that the ancients built the skeleton of every story that can possibly be told. Everything since then, for the last 2,000 years, has just been us putting different clothes on that same skeleton.
It reminds me of that concept of the 7 basic plots that you hear about, overcoming the monster, rags to riches, the quest, voyage and return, and so on.
Exactly. Christopher Booker wrote a whole book on it.
And we like to think we are sophisticated modern people, but we are still sitting around the cultural campfire telling the same 7 stories over and over and over again.
Let's take a modern myth. Star Wars. Everyone cites it as this massive, imaginative leap forward in the 70s. But what is it, really?
It's a fairy tale in space.
It's overcoming the monster mixed with the quest, structurally. It's identical to the myths of King Arthur, which are themselves echoes of the myths of the Greek heroes. If you strip away the spaceships and the lightsabers, which are just, set dressing, what are you left with?
A farm boy with a special lineage who loses his mentors, faces a dark father figure, and saves the realm.
Sophocles would recognize that story immediately. He wouldn't know what a droid was, but he would understand the loyalty of the sidekick. He wouldn't know what the Force was, but he would understand fate and destiny.
So when Kinqade uses the word plagiarism, he's using it in a very specific structural sense. He's not saying you copied the words on the page, necessarily.
Yeah.
He's saying you copied the soul of the story because you had no choice. There are no other souls available on the market.
Correct. He argues that we are trapped in a closed loop of storytelling. We are just rearranging the furniture in a room that the Romans built for us. We might buy a new throw pillow or paint the walls neon, but the room itself hasn't changed its dimensions in 2 millennia.
Which brings us to the why. Why are there no new souls available? Why can't we just invent an eighth basic plot? Why can't we break out of the room? And this moves us into the second segment of our discussion, which Kinqade, very strangely, bases on mathematics. Segment 2, the math of unoriginality.
I have to admit, I do not expect a statistics lesson in an essay about literature, but his logic is, well, it's pretty sound. He lays out a timeline argument first.
Right.
He points to the sheer scale of recorded human history, nearly 4,000 years of it, and then he couples that with the population argument.
With billions upon billions of people who have lived and died.
Think about the actual numbers. Since the dawn of humanity, demographers estimate that roughly 100 billion humans have lived. 100 billion separate lives.
That's a number that's almost impossible to comprehend.
It is 100 billion people who have loved, fought, murdered, sacrificed, grieved, and laughed. They have betrayed one another, they have saved one another, they have ignored one another. Every single human drama you can imagine played out on a scale of billions.
So it's a statistical argument against uniqueness, he's asking. With that much data, with that many people over that much time, is it even statistically possible for you sitting in your coffee shop in 2024 with your laptop to have a thought or an emotion or an experience that hasn't happened before?
And his answer is a resounding, unapologetic no. He says, and this is a killer line, if you believe you have an original story to tell, you are likely the victim of a poor education.
Ouch. That is so abrasive. He's basically saying you only think you're original because you haven't read enough to know who you're copying.
It's harsh, but consider the logic behind it. We often mistake novelty for originality, and this is a crucial distinction Kinqade makes, at least implicitly.
Okay, break that down. Novelty versus originality.
You might think, well, no one has ever written a story about a sentient cyborg falling in love with a smart toaster during the French Revolution. And sure, maybe that specific combination of nouns, cyborg, toaster, France, hasn't been used. That's novel.
Right.
But the emotion, the core of the story.
The emotion is the key. The feeling of a forbidden or impossible love, that's Romeo and Juliet, that's Lancelot and Guinevere. The feeling of loving an inanimate object or something that can't possibly love you back, that's the myth of Pygmalion, that's the myth of Narcissus.
Exactly. The cyborg is just a costume. The toaster is just a prop. The underlying emotional dynamic has been played out 1 billion times before. Kinqade calls this a disturbing thought because it suggests that life and human experience are finite.
That word finite appears a lot in his thinking. We tend to view the human experience as infinite, expansive, limitless, but Kinqade argues it is bounded. There is a floor and a ceiling to what a human being can feel.
Think of it like the color spectrum. The human eye can only perceive a certain range of colors. We can't see ultraviolet, we can't see infrared. Our hardware has limits.
Okay.
Similarly, the human heart can only feel a certain range of emotions. You can be happy, sad, angry, jealous, grief-stricken, euphoric, but you cannot invent a new emotion. You can't feel, let's call it schlorp.
Schlorp.
Exactly. It's a hypothetical new emotion. It doesn't exist. You can't even imagine what it would feel like because your emotional hardware isn't built for it. And because the palette of human emotion is limited, the stories we tell about those emotions must, by definition, also be limited. We are painting with the same 5 or 6 primary colors that the cavemen used. We're just getting better at blending them.
He drives this point home with what I call the empty vessel theory. He says, and this is another quote that really stuck with me, nearly all that you know you have learned from someone or something outside yourself. That really struck a chord because we like to think our personalities are internal, that they grow from some seed inside us.
But this is basic John Locke philosophy, isn't it? Tabula rasa, the blank slate. We are born knowing almost nothing. Everything we become, our language, our beliefs, our fears, even our most cherished desires, is a collection of external inputs.
Right. You learn to fear fire because you either touched it or were told to fear it. You learn to love stories because they were told to you as a child.
So, if your output, your writing, is based entirely on your input, what you've seen and heard and read, and your input comes from other people, how can your output possibly be original? It's logically circular.
You are a recycling bin for the world around you. A very sophisticated emotional recycling bin, but a bin nonetheless.
A filter, not a source.
I feel like we're spiraling into nihilism here. If we accept all of this, if we accept that we are just recycling bins for 2,000 years of history,
Yeah.
then what is the job of the writer? Why bother writing at all? Why not just point at the library and say, go read that?
He asks that himself.
Kinqade asks it directly, what's left?
And this is where the essay pivots. This is where he moves from the cynical philosopher to the pragmatic mechanic. This is segment 3, the methodology of the great plagiarist.
Oh.
His answer to what's left is one simple word: improvement.
Improve what's already been done. That's his motto. Take what exists and make it better.
He essentially outlines a recipe for writing. He completely demystifies the process. He says, number 1, take someone else's work. 2, fix what is wrong with it. 3, put your own unique spin on it. 4, present it from a new viewpoint. 5, maybe combine 2 different sources into a unified whole.
And 6.
6, slap your name on it and cash in.
It sounds so industrial, like it's a manufacturing process.
Yeah.
Take this chassis, put a better engine in it, paint it red, sell it. It completely strips all the magic and romance away. It sounds like he's describing how to flip a house, not how to write a novel.
It's intentionally unromantic, but then he plays his trump card. To defend this industrial, almost cynical process, he invokes the holiest name in all of literature.
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare.
The Shakespeare defense. You really can't argue with Shakespeare. If Shakespeare did it, it must be okay.
Right. And Kinqade argues that Shakespeare was the ultimate practitioner of this method. And historically, I mean, he is 100% correct. We need to be absolutely clear about this. William Shakespeare did not invent the plots for his most famous plays.
I think a lot of people forget this, or maybe never learned it. We think of Romeo and Juliet, and we think, oh, what a genius original idea. But it wasn't his idea at all.
Not even close. He adapted it from a long narrative poem by a guy named Arthur Brooke called The Tragical History of Romeo and Juliet, which was published 30 years before Shakespeare ever wrote his play.
And where did Brooke get it?
Brooke adapted his from an Italian novella by Matteo Bandello, and Bandello's novella was based on an even earlier story, which was probably based on Ovid's myth of Pyramus and Thisbe from ancient Rome.
So it's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah.
Shakespeare was doing exactly what Kinqade describes. He took an existing story, he fixed it, meaning he made the language a million times better, he gave the characters actual psychological depth, he improved the pacing, and he put his unique spin on it.
Exactly. Think about Hamlet. That's from the Norse legend of Amleth, King Lear, from the ancient British legend of Lear of Britain, Othello, from an Italian short story. We don't revere Shakespeare because he was an inventor of plots. We revere him because he was a master optimizer.
Optimizer. I like that word.
He took a boring, clunky, rhyming poem about 2 kids from Verona and turned it into the greatest tragedy in the English language. So Kinqade is asking a very pointed question. Why is it shameful for a modern writer to do what the greatest writer in history did as his standard operating procedure?
It reframes the whole idea of creativity as optimization. You are optimizing the delivery system for a story that already exists in the cultural consciousness. You aren't the architect, you're the interior designer.
That's a great analogy. The walls are already up, the roof is already on. Your job is to make the room livable, to make it beautiful, to make the reader feel something profound while they are standing within those pre-existing walls.
And he would argue that if you try to build a house with no walls and no roof, just for the sake of being original, you don't end up with a house. You end up with a pile of rubble that no one wants to live in.
Unreadable experimental fiction, perhaps.
Exactly. But this reliance on existing material, it brings us to a really interesting psychological hurdle. Why do we resist this idea so much? Why do I feel a little defensive even just talking about it? I have this instinct to say, no, my ideas are mine.
And Kinqade had an answer for that.
He says it's because of our ego, which leads us perfectly into segment 4, the ego and the illusion of self.
This is probably the most psychological part of his argument, and for some, maybe the most personally offensive. He directly attacks the sacred concept of personal experience.
Yeah, he calls personal experience an illusion created by ego. That's a heavy statement. The thought process is, I felt this, therefore it must be unique. And Kinqade just says, no, your ego just wants it to be unique so that you feel special.
He asks a devastatingly simple question. What experience could you possibly have that no one in the history of humanity has ever had before? It really forces you, the listener, to confront your own insignificance in the grand timeline of human history.
Right.
If you read a story based on your first heartbreak, you are writing a story based on a chemical and social reaction that billions of people have navigated before you. You might have your specific details, the name of the cafe where you broke up, the song that was playing on the radio, but the experience of heartbreak, It is universal. It's a template.
He suggests that a story is nothing more than a compilation of source materials. And this is where that DJ analogy you mentioned earlier comes in, which I think is just perfect for the modern era.
It is the perfect modern metaphor for what he's describing. Think about a great club DJ. They don't play the instruments on the original records. They don't sing the vocals on the original tracks.
Yeah.
They take existing pieces of music, other people's finished work, and they layer them. They tempo mash them. They EQ them. They add effects. They create a mix.
And we absolutely consider a great DJ to be an artist, right? We pay them millions of dollars. We go to huge festivals just to see them mix other people's music together. No one boos them off stage for not having written the songs themselves.
Absolutely. And Kinqade is saying a writer is a DJ of prose. You take a character trait you observed in your uncle, that's sample 1. You take a plot point from a movie you saw in 1998, that's sample 2. You take a setting from a travel brochure, sample 3. You take a dialogue rhythm you like from Hemingway, sample 4. You mix them all together.
The mix is yours, but the individual tracks are not.
Precisely. And if you deny that, if you stand up and say, no, I invented this character out of thin air, Kinqade says you are just lying to yourself. You are blinded by the ego that refuses to admit it's a compiler. You want to be the musician, but you're actually the DJ.
And honestly, is there anything wrong with being the DJ? A good mix creates a totally new vibe, a new energy. It moves people just as much as an original song.
That's his point. He is telling us to stop being ashamed of the samples we use. We should embrace our role as mixers and curators.
But it's not just our experiences or the stories that are limited. It's the actual tools we use to describe them. This brings us to segment 5, the prison of language.
This part really struck me because I'm a word nerd. Kinqade argues that the English language, as expressive and beautiful as it is ultimately a finite container.
Vocabulary is finite. Grammar is finite.
It's a closed system. There are only so many words in the dictionary. It's a big number, a few 100,000 depending on how you count, but it's not infinite. And most of us, let's be honest, only use a tiny fraction of those in our daily lives.
And the grammar is even more restrictive, right? Subject, verb, object. You can't just arrange words randomly or you sound insane. You can't just invent new sentence structures without being labeled experimental or, unreadable.
And Kinqade calls publishing standards supremely restrictive. And if you think about it for a second, he's right. If you write a sentence that is too abstract, editors will say it's unreadable. If you write a sentence that's too long, they'll say it's a run-on sentence.
Show, don't tell.
Show, don't tell, kill your darlings. You are forced into these very narrow corridors of what is considered correct writing. You're walking down a hallway that millions of writers have walked down before you.
So if the tools are limited, finite words, finite grammar, finite rules of what's considered good, eventually repetition is statistically inevitable. It's like the monkeys with typewriters theory, but in reverse. We aren't waiting for them to accidentally write Shakespeare. We've already written everything except the gibberish.
And this leads to his inferior prose argument. This is one of my favorite rhetorical questions in the entire text because it is so brutally efficient and logical.
I know what you're talking about.
He asks, why use your own inferior prose when superior prose is already available to be borrowed?
It's the logic of pure efficiency. If someone has already described a sunset perfectly like absolute perfection, the words just sing on the page, it captures the light and the color exactly, why should I struggle for 3 hours to write my own mediocre description of a sunset?
Just use the good one. He says, it is illogical to try to reinvent the wheel if someone has already described the wheel perfectly. It's a completely utilitarian view of art. If the goal is to convey the image of the wheel to the reader in the most effective way possible, use the most effective description available, even if you didn't write it. Why give the reader a B- description when you have access to an A+1?
But that flies in the face of everything we are taught in school from the age of 5. Use your own words.
And Kinqade would say, why? My words aren't as good as Shakespeare's on this particular subject.
And he knows people will hate this. He calls out the literati. He knows the critics will come for him.
He doesn't just call them the literati, he calls them the leader Nazi, which is, a bit much.
Right, the leader Nazi. He says he's willing to flip the bird to them. He really frames this as a kind of class war between the pretentious critics who want art to be this high-minded, original, mystical thing, and the honest compilers like himself who just want to tell a good story and entertain people.
He views the critics as the gatekeepers of a lie. They want to maintain the illusion of the genius author because it sustains their entire industry. If everyone admitted they were just remixing old stories, the critics wouldn't have anyone to put on a pedestal and worship.
So he's saying, let's just be honest about the manufacturing process.
Let's open the factory doors and show everyone how the sausage is made.
But wait a minute. If we are just taking superior prose from other places, aren't we just stealing? This is where the rubber really meets the road. We have to talk about the law and about ethics. Segment 6. The ethics and economics of borrowing.
This is a crucial distinction he makes, and it's the foundation of his entire defense. Kinqade carefully separates plagiarism, which, remember, he proudly admits to, from abuse of copyright.
Okay, let's unpack that difference, because in my head, and I think in most people's heads, they're the same thing. If I plagiarize your work, I am by definition violating your copyright.
Not necessarily. Plagiarism is an ethical failure. It is claiming credit for ideas or words that are not yours. It's a lie. It's an academic sin. Copyright infringement is a legal and economic failure. It is impeding the ability of the copyright holder to make money from their creation.
And Kinqade doesn't care about the ethical failure at all.
Not one bit. He only cares about the money. He says explicitly in the text, it's always about money.
Okay, so how does he justify it economically?
He argues that his works do not compete economically with the sources he borrows from. This is his non-competition defense.
Right, because he mentions that a lot of his sources are defunct, they're out of print, or they're in the public domain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you take the plot from a forgotten pulp novel that was printed once in 1930 and hasn't been sold in a bookstore for 80 years, are you taking bread out of anyone's mouth?
Probably not.
Kinqade says no. You aren't stealing a sale from the original author because the original author isn't selling anything anymore. The author is likely long dead, and the publishing house is gone. The work is economically inert.
It's the no harm, no foul defense. If the original creator isn't losing a single dime in potential income, then who is the victim in this scenario?
And he takes it a step further. He claims he is free to legally and legitimately create derivative works. He sees his stories as a form of upcycling.
Upcycling.
He's taking literary trash-forgotten stories that are gathering dust and turning them into a new, viable product. It's like finding a broken old chair in a dumpster, sanding it down, giving it a new coat of paint, and selling it at a flea market. Did you steal the chair? Maybe, technically, but it was in the trash. You're the one who gave it value again.
He has a great quote for this. He says, "My silly little stories harm no one." It's almost charmingly self-deprecating. He's basically saying, look, I'm just making little entertainments out of spare parts that nobody wanted. Can everyone just leave me alone?
But notice how he shifts the entire moral weight of the act to economics. In Kincade's world, morality is defined exclusively by financial harm. If there is no financial harm, there can be no immorality. It's a very, very capitalist framework for art.
It really is. It completely ignores the concept of moral rights of an artist. The right to have your work attributed to you simply because you made it, regardless of whether it's making money. But Kinqade clearly thinks that's just vanity.
To him, attribution is ego. Profit is reality. If the check clears at the end of the day, the method was valid. He is a pragmatist in the absolute extreme. He has no time for the sentimental value of ownership of an idea.
Which brings us to the grand finale, the beautiful logical twist at the very end of the essay. This is segment 7. The final paradox.
This is a beautiful little bit of sophistry. I really admire the cleverness of it. Kinqade proudly states, I am a plagiarist, the greatest since Shakespeare.
He just leans right into it. He wears it like a badge of honor. He's embracing the villain role. He wants you to clutch your pearls.
But then he poses a logic puzzle that flips the whole thing completely on its head. He asks, essentially, does a preemptive admission of guilt excuse the act?
This is where it gets really, really interesting. He argues, if I tell you I'm unoriginal from the very beginning, if I announce to the world that I'm a plagiarist right from the start, then I haven't actually deceived you.
Exactly. The sin of plagiarism, by its very definition, relies on the lie. It relies on the author implicitly or explicitly saying, I made this, when they didn't.
But Kinqade says, I did not make this. I compiled this. I remixed this. By telling the truth about his method, he argues he has inoculated himself against the very charge of plagiarism. It's a loophole. I can't be a liar if I openly tell you that I'm lying.
It raises the question, if you admit your work is unoriginal, have you actually committed the sin? Or have you just categorized your work differently? He frames himself not as a thief, but as a curator.
A curator of human experience.
Correct. And since his name, or his nom de plume, is on the cover of the book, he gets the credit for the act of curation, not the act of invention. Just like a museum curator gets credit for putting together a brilliant exhibition, even though they didn't paint any of the pictures.
He's saying, I am the curator of these lost plots. I found them, I polished them, and I brought them back to you.
It turns the entire essay into this wonderful philosophical knot. You finish reading it and you're left thinking, wait a minute, is he a villain? Is he a hack? Or is he the only truly honest writer in the entire world?
That is the ambiguity he wants to leave you with. He wants you to question the value we place on originality itself. Is it better to have a mediocre but technically original story, or a brilliantly retold story that moves you?
What do we value more? The
Yeah.
source of the materials or the quality of the final construction?
So let's wrap this up. We've gone on this whole journey from the death of originality in the Roman Empire, through the bleak math of finite human experience, all the way to this very clever economic and philosophical defense of the remix.
It's a journey from cynicism to pragmatism. Kinqade starts by destroying the idol of the solitary genius artist, but he builds a new figure in its place. The compiler, the craftsman, the one who preserves and polishes the past for a new generation.
It definitely gives you a different way to look at your bookshelf. Instead of seeing a collection of totally unique, separate worlds, maybe it's more like a collection of remixes, a library of cover songs.
And perhaps that's okay. If the stories are good, does it really matter where the parts came from? If the car drives beautifully and gets you where you need to go, do you really care that the engine is a Ford and the tires are Michelin?
That's the key takeaway for you, the listener, today. You have to decide if you agree with Kincade's cynical or maybe just realistic view that we're all just rearranging furniture, or if you believe there is still some magic left in the tank.
Is true invention still possible? Or are we just, at best, discovering things that were already there, waiting to be combined in a new way?
Here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on, something that builds on Kincade's logic. Think about the last time you told a joke at a party. You know the one. You heard it from a coworker who probably heard it on a podcast, who heard it from their dad 40 years ago.
Right.
When you told that joke and everyone laughed, did you steal that laugh?
Or were you just acting as a historian of humor? A curator of a good punchline?
And if you admit up front, hey, this isn't my joke, but you've got to hear this, does the laughter then belong to you? Or are you just the delivery mechanism for a joy that was created long before you came along?
A fascinating question.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Until next time, keep questioning what you create.
And keep reading, even if it's all been written before.
See you next time.